Yeah, I'm sorry, I left my phone over there, and I think someone's trying to get in. And that is why, that's exactly why this theme came up for me too, was not just how to be creative, but like when you're not feeling it. Because there's so many other things right now that are really taking literal energy, like literal, like not just this woo-woo energy. It's like physically palpable what the energy is that we have to summon to be able to kind of like get through the days. So, all right. So we're doing a quick round of introductions of who you are, where you are. If you're with an organization, you can say that. And then if you currently have a creative challenge that you want to bring to the group, I am going to do what I've done each week, which is a little overview of kind of a topic and share some tools, but then jump into conversation. So the theme this week is how to be creative when you're not feeling it. So Sarah Carminati, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Sarah. I work with the National Performance Network in New Orleans. I think my creative challenge is everything right now, but I'm completely new to my role as communications manager. It's also the first time I've had this role. And, I think my goal for the job is to kind of just be sharing things that our artists are producing all the time. We're in a lucky position where we get to pay artists to write for us, to produce things for us. But right now is not really a moment when I can ask for that. I'm not going to ask people to, and I did make, kind of a general email ask to invite people, to write to me, and didn't get a huge response from that. So it's kind of just been, what else can I do right now?
Right.
And it's been all, sharing emergency funds, resources, things like that. That's been my focus. But
yeah, very like informational, which can seem like it doesn't need to be creative. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but yeah, that makes sense. All right, Kristen Muller.
Hi. I'm the director of Peters Valley. Hi, Anita. Haven't seen you in a long time. Anyway, as creative challenge, I haven't felt personally creative in terms of my own practice lately, but in art school, they always say sometimes you just need to go and make a mess, put a mark on a page, make a movement, take the first step. So I always remind myself that everything doesn't need to be perfect or a masterpiece. It's just about sort of the practice. You got to lay the bricks and build the wall, and sometimes the inspiration will come. I think that's an Eddie Vedder quote. But what I am finding is that through the ability to connect with this platform with people and have conversations, I think there's a lot of potential for sparks of creativity. So I think the need for collaboration in that sense, and not to be corny about community, but like, I know when we're talking with my staff or my board, lots of great ideas percolate. So I think we don't have to come up with all the ideas ourselves.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that, and I'm going to share a tool for helping to kind of spark that a little bit. Okay, Brienne?
I'm Brienne Rosner, Gathering Craft Fair Director at Peters Valley School of Craft. I work with Kristen. I realize like the creative ideas are not as challenging as the capacity to implement them. My mind is always going, and I always have so many ideas, but in this time there's so much other work that needs to be done, and so it's hard to then find the time to be able to work to implement those creative ideas. So hopefully soon, but we're trying to get through some of the more nuts and bolts things that need to be attended to in this transitional time.
Yeah. So I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable. I think that's mostly going to affect the video. Is everybody okay with can everybody sort of hear? Like, can everybody sort of see, but can everybody hear okay? Yeah? Thumbs up if you can hear okay. Then I'm not going to shut down and do a different connection just because I think that will take time away from our conversation. Okay. So Guylaine, you want to introduce yourself, where you are right now, what group you're with, and if you're facing any creative challenges right now. The theme for today is how to be creative when you're not feeling it. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay.
There.
I'm Guylaine in Charleston, South Carolina. She, her, hers. And my challenges is that the project that I was really part of it, connected to, was really trying to link deeply artists and tiny businesses, so through all kinds of forms of communications. And now we are totally limited for that. We are limited with the digital, which is not functional for everybody we work with, or telephones, which is not friendly for everybody, or even hard to use sometimes for some people when they are actually in different situations and not totally isolated for speaking really their mind. And I find myself at home in my studio actually going to very traditional stuff, practice, let's say, without yet knowing why am I doing that.
Yeah.
And that's annoying for me.
Yeah, I can see.
Regressing on that sort.
Yeah.
But it's by lack of capability to do other things.
Yeah. So some of the tools that I'll share with you today are ways to channel that and to be able to quickly identify, okay, why am I doing this? And then be able to be creative either on your own or with other people to find the next thing that you can do with that. And I think that we often, as creatives and as people that care deeply, we want things to be clear and we want things to be, to have a path. And sometimes we just need to do the next thing. Or as my husband says, just do the next one impossible thing at a time. All right, Megan.
Oh, I love that. I feel that too, all the time, constantly. I think I'm trying to I'm Megan Van Dyke. I'm from the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation. Like many of you, I'm wearing multiple hats, communications and something else. So I'm feeling right now, there's this wave happening with this pandemic, right? Like for me, there was an overload of work and stress and navigating what is happening right now. I feel like I'm in a listening zone right now and absorbing and adapting, and I'm feeling the pressure to be planning, and I'm trying not to feel that, and the just do one thing. I'm really proud of myself for making this call and making the time to think about communication. So that's my one thing for right now. So I'm appreciative of that.
Great. All right, Yesenia, welcome.
Hello there. Am I on mute? No,
you're fine. We can hear you.
I was recommended to this group by Priscilla I think she's at Arts Ed New Jersey in the Governor's Awards. Mm-hmm. I wish I would have known about it earlier. I feel like finally there's a group for me in the arts.
Good.
I'm not an artist per se, but I do the marketing and communications at an arts organization in Southern Jersey. So we have moved most of our things online, which means I'm all of a sudden the prized person at the organization. So I think so far what some of you have said about doing one thing at a time, or the lady in South Carolina who said, why am I doing this? I find myself just all over the place and not organized, and all of the different departments want their stuff done, but there's just trying to get it all organized and get a branded message out during this new time.
Yeah. It's really important. We talked last week or the week before, and Yesenia, I'll send you some posts on our website that have a lot of the content from the previous group sessions that we've had. And we will be putting these up online. We're just trying to edit, and make them a little bit more enjoyable to watch than me drinking coffee, getting ready for the thing. But one of the things that we talked about last week was that, and every week, is that for all intents and purposes, communications is the only thing we have right now. So suddenly the communications folks are the people that are now holding up not just and it's always been this way, quite frankly, because communications is a representation of every single thing in an organization or a business or an individual's artwork, right? Communications is always like the conduit to the outside world. But now I think it's really becoming clear that the communications folks are the ones that have to hold all of this space and all of this information for programming. And that's why today, when we get into my best practices little spiel, and Kristen, you mentioned this, making sure that you're not just like putting your head down and trying to do it all by yourself. First of all, because you can't. It's not your job as a communications person to deliver all of the programming and to like engage everybody and raise all the funds and all of that. You're the voice through which those messages are getting out there. So you have to take that responsibility very seriously, like being the conduit, but being very careful to not, and the older way of thinking about this would be like, stay in your lane and don't like bleed over into that. I think the other way that comes with the nature of people who are in communications is that we want to do the work because we want to demonstrate what's happening through communication. And there's a fine line between communicating something and doing all the work around it. It's a really fine line. So that's part of the having a system and being able to plan and knowing who's doing what that we've talked about in previous sessions. All right, Brandy, you want to introduce yourself? Hi there.
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. This is Brandy Turner with SIP Culture in Mississippi, and I am the program manager. Glad to be here with you all, and I appreciate everybody sharing where they're at. So for me, being the program manager, there's a particular program, our first program that we launched actually last summer, was the program that was a youth program. And of course, I am struggling with coming up with creative ways to be able to engage the young people in our community when I live in a rural community. So having access to internet, let alone broadband, but just having access to the internet is a real struggle. Most of the kids in that program don't have that. So, but yet there is the kids are really wanting this program to actually still happen, as we all want many things to still happen. And so I'm trying to think of what are the creative ways to like really engage them, in this particular time. And one thing that's really important to know about this program, it's called our Culture Lab. So it is a digital media program and agriculture program. So, when you think about that, the access that they have is when they come to our physical space and we're working together. So that's what I find that I'm really challenged with, but I am definitely committed. So I'm not in the place this week, particularly of like, needing to be creative and not feeling it. I'm feeling it and just can't come up with anything right now.
Right.
Creative juices are not flowing.
Yeah, that's good. So I want to leave some time at the end of this session for us to, maybe we could do this as a case study brainstorm, and we could all help you think of some out of the box ways that you could still deliver this program.
Okay.
Because I think that would be a
Appreciate
perfect
you.
example.
And I apologize for not being on video. I was committed to working out today, so I haven't, done my reboot. And if I can get a Central Time Zone pass, I appreciate it. All right, thanks.
We understand, and we saw you last week, and we'll see you again. So
All right,
I
cool.
do
Thanks,
miss
y'all.
that bright smile, but I can imagine it in my head. So
Thank you.
all right, Sanaz, welcome. It's good to see you here. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having us, Ennis. My name is Sanaz Hodra. I am a consultant in the field of arts and art education. And I think my creativity level ebbs and flows on a day-to-day basis, pending kind of like, what we're dealing with in the ether. But what I've found is that sometimes it's been more difficult to communicate with partners in getting them to be creative. And they have these blocks up because of all the things that they're dealing with. Some of them is just keeping their organization's doors open, and the capacity is so much less. So there's more work to do in trying to take down the "but I can't" and think about what their community needs and how we could do it.
Mm-hmm.
Not the same. And I think there needs to be a little bit of coming terms of it's not the same. There's a grieving that's happening amongst the population, that it's okay to grieve, but then so I feel like everything's taking a lot longer for people to grasp and open up, and some of it's necessary. And then, being kind and gentle with ourselves on a day-to-day basis to be like, we're doing the best we can.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think because all of you attended this session today, you're automatically anointed as stewards of care, like creative care for others. And that is a role, that the idea of creativity, because humans are naturally creative. We think that it's just like, well, we just got to brainstorm, we got to get people together, and everybody kind of might be in a creative mood or not. And that there is a role for facilitating creative conversations, and that any of us can be leaders in that way. And that's what I'm hoping to share, some tools and some practices today that might help you continue to hold that up when the energy that's coming back at you, if you're empathetic, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say most of the people on this, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say most humans are empathetic. They're just, at different levels of receptivity. But if you're trying to engage others in creative conversation and all they're giving back is like fear or resistance, that can very easily take you out. And one of the practices is being able to acknowledge that, but also move beyond that taking you out personally. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. All right, let's just finish up our last row of folks here. Shavana, I see you on the list. I'm hoping that you were able to get into the audio too. Are you able to introduce yourself? Yay.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shavana Roberts, and I am the Communications and Administrative Associate with Subculture in Mississippi. My role is fairly new, so I am taking the opportunities to soak up any information that I can and implement those into the projects that we have in the works. However, I am working my way through my process with my team. Brandy is on. Good morning, Brandy. And I think it always helps to see things from a different perspective when we work together. So,
that's great.
Good morning again. I apologize for the video, but I do not have a great connection.
It's okay.
And it will not allow me to connect with my video. Hopefully someday soon I will be able to, but I am glad to be here this morning.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. All right, two more folks. Anna?
Hey everyone, Anna Schaffner from Carol and Dorfman Dance. I am the Communications and Development Manager. I think my biggest creative challenge right now, we are a dance company that does a great variety of things. So we almost, like many people, I'm sure, don't have enough time to even promote everything that we're doing. Since all this started, we've transitioned to doing online public free classes via Zoom that happen twice a week. And it's pretty unusual for us to have something that we're promoting that's happening multiple times a week, and it's the same thing for an extended period of time. We don't do that very often. So I'm trying to figure out how to keep our messages fresh when we're promoting the same event over and over and over again, versus a different performance or class or residency every week. Yeah, just trying to figure out it's sort of a different mode of communication for us.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, great. All right. Shannon, thanks for joining us again. We're just introducing ourselves, where we are right now. And the theme for this week is how to be creative when you're not feeling it. So if you have any creative challenge that you're working through right now that you want to share, otherwise just who you are and where you are.
Hey y'all, this is Shannon calling in from Atlanta, and I would say my creative challenge is actually just how to manage it all without making money. I have lots of ideas that just none of them are paying. But I've been taking this great Seth Godin workshop for freelancers, and he talked about the power of being a convener. So I was as you are doing right now, and I love the previous person also was talking about just offering, showing what you're good at. And so I yesterday I reached out to a friend and said, hey, let's think about making a show happen. So nice. I think that's the kind of juiciness that keeps us going, right?
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
All right, and Meredith, our last person to join us. Meredith, welcome, and I think you heard the prompt for the introduction, right?
Yes.
Great.
Introduce yourself and tell your creative challenge, that's right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith Burns. I'm from Jersey City, New Jersey. And my creative challenge has been, well, I'll be honest, I've actually felt very creative during this time. But I think what poses a challenge to that creativity is just a lot of the feelings I have around everything that's happening, and managing my staff has been really challenging, I guess. They're a great group of people. We're a very small but mighty staff, but often I think that it's probably all the feelings are also a challenge to their creativity and their productivity at this time as well. So if anyone has any tips and tricks for how to sort of manage the day-to-day emotions that come with this experience, I'd be grateful for that.
Yeah, that is good. I'd like to talk about that too. Okay, so let me jump into just some best practices, and then we can open it back up. I love being able to do introductions because it really gives us a good grounding point. So I wanted to share a few things. If you were on this call the last couple times, you know that we're talking broadly about a topic and then talking about some specific either practices or tools that can, hang on, I want to open the chat. Oh, good. Brandy's saying she's already thinking. She's already got her creative juices going. So that's great. Okay. So first of all, I wanted to share with you this week's process for even picking a theme. So I try to pick a theme based on what's going on out there in the world, how we relate to it as communicators, as conveners, as engagers, as organizers. And I was like, I don't know what it's going to be. And then we have a practice at Social Impact Studios where for our weekly meeting, because we have a set the week kind of meeting, that we we pull one of our core values out and we identify it as the core value of the week. And I do that pretty intuitively. And sometimes another staff person will just randomly pick something. We don't try to like go through each one of them and have a rotation. We're just like, let's pull this core value out. And this is a practice that I really recommend people do because it keeps your core values in the front of your people. And Meredith, this is one of those things that might help you as you're thinking about, motivating your staff and helping your staff without being also like, before you hopped on, we were talking a little bit about empathy and how sometimes when we're the leader and we're leading a creative moment or any moment where we're trying to, motivate and help people move through something, that the response back, because others are not the leader, they may be either having fear or emotional response or putting up resistance out of kind of self-protective mechanisms, that can take us out as leaders. And so we need to really have some go-to practices that help us like acknowledge and be empathetic and be there with people, but not get sucked into the emotional, being taken out in that moment, because it is our job to foster this, whatever the thing is that we're leading. So for this week, our core values we have a ton of core values. We have like 45 core values that came from a process of like our stakeholders, i.e. me and our staff mostly, because we're not a nonprofit. We don't have a board, but anybody who is really like deeply engaged as an intern, as a staff person, as a director, created this list of core values, and they run the gamut. Like one of our values is like have a good time all the time, and the other is like listen to other people's stories. And this week's core value that I picked was foster a collective creative experience. And so that was my theme, and that was what was like on my sticky note. Everything I'm doing this week, I'm looking through that lens, and that made it really easy for me to pick a topic for this week. I was like, oh, it's got to be about creativity. It's got to be about the power of collective creativity. What Kristen was saying about doing it in tandem with others. So I just wanted to share that, first of all, that's where that theme came from, that the theme of how to be creative when you're not feeling it, which is an obvious thing to pick for this moment in time. Anita spoke to that energy. A bunch of other people, Yesenia spoke to that energy. Megan, you spoke to that energy of like, well, right now I'm feeling this like anxiety or this sadness or this heaviness. So obviously that's going to challenge my creativity. So that's the lens, and that helped me to get this theme. So then I wanted to share a couple of other best practices and tools and then open it back up. So one of the things, just to keep that in mind, that's a designed system and a specific tool. So one of the things that I'm going to recommend, there's kind of 3 practices that I recommend, but one is rely on pre-designed systems and tools and practices that you have developed for your own kind of energy management, but also just practical day-to-day stuff, which means you have to take some time sometimes to design those things. And that can get to what you were talking about, Ghislaine, of like, I'm just doing this thing. Why am I doing it? That having some practices in place that are universal, no matter if you're with others, online, on the phone, can get together in person, doesn't matter. They will always be the way you go about doing your work. Having a few of those that you do regularly and consistently can really help with creativity, because we think sometimes that creativity is supposed to be this bolt of lightning that is coming from a muse. And often it is, but under the right conditions. And the right conditions are what you know about yourself. Do I need to, drink a lot of water to be creative? Do I need to get enough sleep? Do I need to not sleep? Do I need whatever those things are? So awareness and designing of a practice that Kristen also spoke to, and artists here, people who are artists here, and know that as a formal concept, but anybody who's a functioning, like, adult, which you all are, has some kind of practice. And sometimes you just have to identify it. So I wanted to just share the other two things and some tools and then open it back up. So the three things that I think are really key are, first of all, getting inspiration from others. So as a designer, this is part of the work that we do as also people who work in advertising and communications and culture work. This is naturally part of the work that we do, because we're trying to be responsive or engaged or protect something that's out in the world, that is a social, popular culture or social connection. And I think that we fight our creative spirit, or the kind of stories about artists or creativity, fight with that concept often because we think we're supposed to be uniquely inspired all the time. And I think that this quote that I found from Mike Watt really sums up something that I think is one way to look at this, which is not saying like there's nothing new in the world, there's nothing new that you can create, but I love the way he said this, which is the only thing new is you finding out about something. Like nothing's really new, but you reinvent it for yourself and find your inner voice. So part of us, I know, especially when I was younger and more kind of, hopefully I'm less egocentric than I was then, but I was like, well, no, I need to create new stuff. I need to like be unique. I need to like make something that's totally new. And I think that is a driving force that we all have, but not equating that with creativity, because really what it is about you speaking to something that is universal in a unique way. So instead of you having to make something all new all the time, that what your real job is an authentic representation of your inner voice in the context of external comprehension. So the first thing is get inspiration from others. Like I have, people have like sticky notes or vision boards, or going and looking at examples of something that is like the challenge that you're trying to solve. That doesn't mean that you're like ripping someone off. It means that you're tapping into the collective, creative human experience. The second thing is engaging other creative thinkers. So I'm going to share here on, let me just get, what I've been doing each week is sharing a tool with everybody that is from our Public Image Works method and program. And the tool that I wanted to highlight today that I think could be used in this time is the creative brief. Now, the creative brief is a thing that designers use all the time. Like we need to make sure that we're on the same page with the collaborating clients that we're working with. So we normally do this to get everything down on paper, but it's also a great exercise for why am I doing this? And this combined with the project planning that we talked about last week, and the action planning documents, and all of this is up online. Yesenia, I'll send you links and you can go through the articles and get those other tools. But I'm gonna put this link, creative, I'm gonna put this in the chat. It's basically, it's a bit.ly link. So it's PAW Creative Brief. And this is just a great tool if you have to write something or make a visual. I mean, this is what we do. We do, content development and visual design. So it's very heavily oriented toward visual design. But I think you could use this for, like Brandy, you could use this for some kind of creative way of engaging the youth through the DigiCulture Lab. Like, what is this project? What are my outcome goals? Like, what do I need to achieve? Who's my audience? Again, we always want to be thinking from their perspective. What's the broad story that needs to be conveyed? So I'm not just all over the place. I've heard a couple people say, like, I have tons of ideas, but I'm either all over the place, I don't know which one to pick, or there's not enough time for me to pull them off. Just getting things a little more designed can help you to then go to the next level. And this is a design tool. It's really identifying what the parts are. What style, what words describe the possible style of the creative work? And then what action do you want to call people to? And I wanted to, remind you all, and Sarah, you brought this up of like, oh, I can't be asking people to do things. I can't be asking people for money right now. That asking is a demonstration of hope right now, and that it is our jobs to make sure that we're asking for the right things, not just asking, but like that we're really genuinely connecting to something that is beneficial to society and to the people being asked. Again, a couple times ago, we defined social impact. Like, what is a social impact? And a social impact is asking others to do something together that will benefit society from your perspective, whatever you think is going to benefit the people that you're working with, society, these times, that is a call to action, and that you need those. And then there are other things that you need to think about, like, which identity is this? So is this coming out from our main organization? Is this a special program? Does it have its own creative lens that we need to promote? And then creative ideas and elements, like, what are you already thinking of? What's already on the table? What is your promotion plan? Like, connecting that in. Other links, like, here's a Pinterest board of all of the images that I saw that I thought were really cool infographics, and that's what I want to create, something like that. So I hope that this tool can help you organize when you're trying to be creative. There are other tools that I've shared through this series that have to do with knowing what your priorities are and having a promotion plan in place that helps you chart your audiences. This tool is really, once you kind of know what you're trying to do, that you're trying to engage artists and tiny businesses still, that, and kind of why you're doing that and who those audiences are. Once you do that, then the next thing is like, well, how am I going to be creative about this? And this is really key to do together. If you can have multiple people doing this with you, it's so much better. It's so unbelievable. Like Shavana said this, like when somebody else's perspective is on the table, it's totally different than what you would have thought. And that will create something completely new, potentially, and completely interesting, and might help you break through those things. So that's number 2, is engage other creative thinkers, and you can use this tool. So you're not just like, what do we want to do? You can actually ask these questions of a group of people that you've brought together to do creativity together. This can help you break through some of those things. And then number 3, so number 1 is get inspiration from others. Number 2 is engage others in creative thinking. And number 3 is rely on design systems and tools for those times when you're not feeling it. So that quote of the month, that Mike Watt quote, I have a system in place where I have to change out my quote on my email once a month. It's on my task list. I get a reminder once a month. It's time to change your quote. And so this quote was already there, and I didn't have to think too hard about it. I have a weekly core value that I brought up, and that was how I determined the theme for this and other things that I'm doing this week. And then this creative brief helps me to think creatively. I want to share 2 more tools, and I'll put the links in the chat. This is my friend Noah Scallon. And Shannon, do you know Noah?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. He is the guy who did the Skull a Day book, where he does art skulls. Every day he would do a different skull, and it might be just something he saw that looked like a skull, or it might be his French toast that he's made to look like a skull. But he's also very well known for his collage sticker portraits and clothing, like Trump Loy pieces that he makes out of collaged things. Everybody should look him up, because he's just a brilliant visual artist in his own right. But one of his things is creativity, and regularized creativity. So he has a bunch of tools, but I'm putting his general website here, which might be helpful for you, Meredith, to look at in terms of team creativity and keeping people engaged and motivated. But there's also a thing called a creative sprint. And if you sign up for his email list, which is a common thing that people do, which is like, I'm going to give you something for free if you get on our email list. You can always get off of that list, but you can also get something out of that. And this is a great thing where you sign up for their email, and then for a whole week you get a daily email that gives you a prompt, and you have to do this little creative exercise. It's really simple, and it's fun, and it's kind of gamified. So it's getting you into the habit of just like, I think, releasing the resistance to creativity, which is the fear of doing it wrong or the fear of not being inspired. So I recommend Noah. I recommend his tools. I recommend that you check them out. And more importantly, I recommend that you let yourself be vulnerable in the face of creativity, because you never know where something's going to come from. And we've all had that experience. We've all had the aha moment that we're like, whoa, I never thought I'd be able to do this. And we have done it. So I'm here to remind you of those times and to also tap into this group to think creatively. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and open it up. And if we, Noah Scallon. If we want to talk through if you had some questions or some things that spoke to you and what I was just talking about. And then I wanted to leave a few minutes for us to brainstorm with Brandy and Shabana about their DigiCulture Lab Youth Program. So what about those things that I was talking spoke to you, or still questions, or still you're not sure how that connects to your creative challenge?
This is Kristen. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Kristen.
Hi. You know, I have to say that we just, for everyone's sake, we've been working with Ennis. Peters Valley's been working with Ennis using some of these tools that she has. And what I find so interesting is that I'm sort of implementing it, not just when we work with Ennis, but when we're trying to communicate. I'm like going back to these tools, because what we're finding is that there are particular points in filling in the blanks that are problematic for us, right? Like when we start thinking about, well, what does our audience need to hear? Not, when we switch it from, well, what do we want to tell them, to, well, what do they need to hear from us, right? And some of us are better at thinking about that than others. But then the other thing is, like, you create this communication, or you're putting something out there, the call to action part has been really interesting. Just the fact that we can write a piece of communication that we think like, okay, we've listed everything we need to tell them, but we haven't put on there how can they help, or how can we solve their problem, or how are we going to communicate, or what's that expectation. So I just wanted to say that these tools, getting into the practice of that, like I'm finding it really good to systemize. So this design systemization, I think, is really helpful for us, especially now that we're working remotely and trying to keep the workflow when we're not seeing each other, except on these scheduled moments.
Yeah, because creativity comes often when we're in person, right? And we're just sensing things, or we're hearing, feeling, or smelling, or whatever. Yeah. You raised something that I wanted to bring up specifically for Guylaine and Brandy and other folks, Megan, some of the things that you were saying, but, and Yesenia, I wanted to really just put out there that if you're ever in doubt, you should ask your audience. And that is very daunting sometimes, for a couple of reasons. People, first of all, say like, well, if we ask our audience, it's going to look like we don't know what we're doing, or that we don't know our expertise. And we're supposed to be the experts on X, Y, and Z. And if we're asking our audience, then it looks like we don't know what we're doing. That it's exactly the opposite. And I don't know, Laura, you could probably speak to this as a coach, like engaging and asking somebody a question or their opinion, I think is such a demonstration of leadership beyond, like, it's not weakness at all. It's the exact opposite. Do you find that? Do you have a practice or a principle about that in your coaching for leaders?
Well, when you think about it as when you ask someone a question, have you ever asked someone a question and that you see this look on their face? It's like relief that they're being seen, and that it's almost like you pre-hear them by inviting them in to be part of what you're creating. Yeah. And so that idea that you can say, hey, we have this body of work and I want to make sure we're on the path toward you, like that we're meeting your heart where it is. And so that idea that it's an invitation to collaborate, even if it's just sharing their opinion or that they need groceries that week, like whatever it is, it's very much more human, I think, than just delivering info at them.
Yeah. So I see a lot of applications for this. I even see like Anita for your like Instagram takeover, like just asking questions instead of saying like, this is my pontification, which you're hesitant to do. And you think that the platforms are bullshit. Like knowing that people use these platforms mostly to like goof off and have a social experience. But they still are real. They still are a way that people are connecting all the time. Like I could see you using that to ask questions rather than trying to think up like witty things to say. Although you're very good at that. So you should be trying to do that every once in a while. But Guylaine, I was thinking about what you were saying of like, not just why am I doing this, but actually asking your audiences, because you do have a relatively tight community right now that's not like tens of thousands of people to ask that question of. You could do it that way. You could send a poll to your entire email list, which is like, during this time, how do you, not even like, how do you want us to communicate with you? But like, what speaks to you? We're artists and we're entrepreneurs. And by nature, we want to know where the gaps are, where the emotions are. So to me, it feels like asking your audience, but also directly asking some core people, so you can just be confident that when you're picking up the phone, that you know that it's a person that likes to talk on the phone. When you're doing a Zoom, that you know that the people who are showing up are comfortable with that platform. When you're doing a chain letter, I'm imagining like, Guylaine, Brandy, I'm imagining, especially the rural community folks, I'm imagining you bringing back the chain letter or the delivery thing. Like when people are getting their food delivered to them, are they getting a little something in there that gives them a connection to what you do? These are just like, I'm just brainstorming right now. Bottom line, asking your audience, and Brandy in particular and Shavana, I think asking youth what it is that they would want to do together in this time when the broadband is non-existent and being on the internet's hard, that in and of itself is a creative invitation.
I understand that. In our case, I cannot do a survey or something because that's what we acted against at one point.
Right.
With the people we work, because we tried to use questions and everything like that, but to develop a conversation, not to be like a survey. When you work with tiny businesses, you have so many people wanting to know things from you for advertising purposes or for selling you something, that it's a relationship we didn't want to have.
Yeah.
So
maybe it's like
thing is also part of my job, and that was to create some tools, and I'm sorry I have to take to create different art tools. So I'll come back, but I have to take that.
Yeah, I think also that may be time for good old fashioned organizing. So I was trained as an organizer. And so when I get down to it's easy for me to think of, well, we've got our MailChimp list and I'm blasting this out and I'm putting it on social media. But sometimes I really have to force myself, even me, to do what we call the Now 25. And those that have gone through our program know what the Now 25 is, where once a month we're identifying 25 actual people and really thinking deeply about, and they're at different levels of engagement with us, and really thinking deeply about how to engage them. And that's really about personal contact. And that's different than sending out a survey or a blast, a broad thing. So sometimes for me, it's getting down to, okay, I'm going to just have 5 people this week and I'm going to pick up the phone and call them. And that's good old fashioned organizing, because we can't go door knocking, but I think of it as door knocking. I think of it as like, I'm in a community and I need to go around on my turf and I need to knock on 40 doors and I need to engage them. Whatever it is that you need to like get yourself to that point. I think creativity is a great invitation. It's not just like, I'm knocking on your door to get money from you. I'm knocking on your door to engage you in my creative conversation here. So somebody's trying to get in. So are there other, okay. So are there other questions or things that people want to say, or could we spend a few minutes brainstorming for the folks at SIP Culture to think about engaging youth?
Well, yeah, I wanted to say that Brienne has recently been contacting one group of constituents, and it brought about a lot of great information for us to help us with decision making. And I would say it also, there was one person in particular who reached out more significantly, and it was a really good connection to make. So I don't know if Brienne wants to talk about that at all, but I thought that it was really useful. And so the survey wasn't just check A, B, or C. There were areas for them to engage with more information. Brienne, you're muted. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure who you were talking about.
Oh, well, with the craft fair exhibitors that, that we had a lot of questions about decisions that we're going to be making, and we reached out to them via survey, and that you got some really good results from it, right? It was like really interesting information.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I think that we had the survey hoping to have a certain set of information answered, and that in a way it opened up a whole other set of things to think about. And that the other, I mean, if people do want to do a survey, what I would say, what I learned from that survey is there were a few questions where I felt that we framed them assuming how people would answer. So for example, we were asking if people were participating in shows. And if they were not participating or applying to shows, what were the reasons why? And in the end, it was overwhelming that people were participating in shows if the shows were happening. So that the way that other question was asked framed it in an assumption that people were not participating. And then I think that some people didn't know how to answer it, or, it was really important data for us, but we didn't necessarily get that proper data or quantifiable data because we ended up not really asking the question the best way. And so there are a lot of those things where setting up a survey is really, it's hard to frame questions.
So asking your audience or sending out a small version of the survey first and seeing how people use it. That's also like asking your audience to engage creatively, even if you're not specifically saying, help us make this the best survey it can be. But at Social Impact Studios, we also have a small group of people. We have a Facebook group and we have an email list of a small group of people. It's about 35 people that are on call for reviewing creative ideas. And that's something that you all could do, is like, could you pre-flight this email before I send it out? Could you, and now with people at home and online, like that's a great way to have like an insiders group, but also to not just think that you have to have it perfect before you send it out to your full list. If you have even one day or a half a day to check it with somebody, that's going to help you. All right, so we're coming up on the top of the hour. So I want to popcorn anybody who has ideas for Brandy and Shavana about how to engage youth, put it in the chat or shout it out. So, oops, Cindy, I sent that to you privately. I didn't mean to. Okay, so I'm saying ask the youth. So I'm also wondering about, even though there's not internet, do they get text messages? Can you do something through a text situation? Discord is another tool that young people are using a lot now. But I think ultimately, like, the young people will have ideas about how to engage that might spur some ideas for you. But it sounds like just being in this room with other people, Brandy, has helped you like start getting, Discord. Okay, great. And Megan just posted something. Great.
So I just posted a project I'm seeing in Newark. It's a partnership between a storytelling organization and Newark Public Schools called Stories from the Pandemic. And it's a really well-made website where people can just share their story. And there's, like, people are using their youth, right? Young people are using their phones to record their story. And then I'm pretty sure, but I'm not sure, on the back end, the storytelling organization is editing it down and like presenting it in this sort of like really cool, thoughtful storytelling way.
Great. And Brandy, there's a thing going on right now that was started by some students, music students, called Worldwide Day of Gratitude, which is tomorrow, the 30th. And that's a good model too. You can look it up at unison.org, I think. And basically it was young people getting together to express thanks to the frontline workers through their own creative whatever. So they were doing videos. The prompt was the Lean on Me song by Bill Withers. And so having a prompt and some kind of response, or not kind of like a contest, but not a contest, but just like a hashtag that everybody can use. But I'm also thinking of physical things like connecting to the farmers market, CSA, agricultural thing. If people are getting food delivered during this pandemic, if there's volunteerism going on, that you can somehow engage the youth in like providing art or other digital, other media to connect the dots.
All right, this all is so super helpful.
Great. All right. Well, I will send out the transcript from this because there's a lot of links here, and I'll send it out to everybody who was on this call and just to our list of people who are getting in on this. But thank you very much for joining me again. It's so great to see you, and I hope that this is helpful. And I just want to encourage you all to tap into your creative spirit, because that is what's going to get us through these tough times, and invite others to be creative with you, because we need to be thinking of what is the new version that isn't just a reaction to fear and scarcity, but what do we want to see happen? So this is not our last one. If that's what you're asking, Yesenia, we're going to do this. I extended it through May. And we may extend it beyond that. All right. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week.
Thank
Bye.
you.